This,
Well, I thought it would be fun maybe to start off hearing about how you got into music. I know you played, I think, cello and tuba and then made the switch to bass during college. I'd love to hear about, how you got started in music and then maybe more specifically how you got started playing jazz.
well, I mean, initially in the fourth grade, they had started a music program at this elementary school, Fuller Elementary, in where I grew up in, actually a little town called Sweet Home in Arkansas. So it was Fuller Elementary, and they brought in someone that said they're going to teach. You can take music lessons. You can play cello or violin or whatever. And I chose cello, and so I played cello the fourth and fifth grades, and then for some reason they ended the program. So that was my first foray into playing music, and I didn't start playing again until the ninth grade when I started playing tuba through ninth grade, through high school, through college. I was my scholarship. I got a scholarship on tuba to Arkansas Tech University, and that paid for my college. And that's when I started playing bass in college. And how I got started playing bass was that they had the second jazz band and they needed a bass player. I guess I was jazz curious, and I always liked music theory anyway. So, but I liked the idea of actually using it to create music in real time. So it kind of appealed to me to play jazz. And I was always kind of curious about jazz. I had listened to it, but I didn't necessarily understand what was happening.
What were some of your favorite things that you were listening to that kind of got you inspired at that point?
Well, I mean, initially I listened to Leroy Vinegar because it was accessible to where my level was, where I was. And I, transcribed some of his things and his bass lines and things. And that was mainly what I was just working on. Because he wasn't really known for his solos, but he was like in the 50s, in the late 50s, 60s, and 70s, everybody was hiring him for records because he provided a very firm foundation for him, and it was always swinging. And so he was always working because of that. And so that was kind of I found a book, and I just started, going through and doing the exercises he had, and his bass lines, just practice playing them and trying to figure it out and things like that, because I didn't really have a teacher that was accessible to me, except, in a few years I went to some of the Abersol camps, and other than that, that was kind of and listening. So I was like listening. That's when I started buying recordings, and of course I was in college. I started playing and listening, but so that was how I got more into the music, and like I said, like I said, I enjoyed music. I mean, I like music theory, but I like the idea of actually using it to create music, and instead of just like analyzing Bach chorales and.
Yeah, totally. I was gonna ask what that transition is like. I know a lot of people, through the course of all these interviews, some of the questions that have come up are like, as a classical musician who's wanting to get into jazz, do you have pointers for that? Or I'd like to hear what your experiences were like making that switch.
Well, I mean, I understood the theory, so I think that's a big part of it. But the how would you say, the phrasing is different. The language is different, and because I was coming up in a classical kind of environment more so than a jazz environment. So understanding the phrasing and improvisation and things like that. So those were things I had to really kind of focus on to get to understand. Because I mean, when I first started trying to take solos, I was like, God, I just suck at this. And I wouldn't take solos for a long time. I just, said, no, I don't. And then I just started finding, I think I've told you this before, it was like a Dizzy Gillespie book, because I was reading a lot of different people, biographies and autobiographies. And the key for me was when I read the line, when somebody asked Dizzy, what do you think about? He said, I think about a rhythm and I put notes to it. And that changed my whole, it kind of switched everything around. And all of a sudden, I actually, every once in a while, I started playing a solo that actually kind of made sense. And, like sounded, actually, like I knew what I was doing. And so that was a big turning point for me. And whenever I got to play with everybody I got to play with, I was always asking them, when I got to play with Benny or people like that, I would just, I probably nagged them too much about asking them questions and stuff. And like Charles McPherson and all these guys, it's like, what are you thinking about when And over the years, I started getting it together, and it just takes time. You got to put in the time and figure this stuff out, and figure out what ultimately bass players get hired to play the bass. They don't get hired because they take great solos, But I mean, that's the job. But I wanted to be able to take a good solo and not, just sound sad, when I took a solo, or just walk through. Even though I have recordings of bass players who would walk through a solo, and then, it's nothing wrong with sometimes I would do that too. Maybe kind of embellish things like that. But once I started feeling comfortable soloing, I was just trying to, get better at it.
That Dizzy quote, it's a good reminder, because I think like myself still, as I'm still like developing my musicianship, I'm always focused on like the notes I'm playing, but I like the reminder that it's all about like the rhythm and the time, and that's like the heart of this music. That's such a good reminder.
It is. It's like, even if you play some wrong notes, if it feels good and it's swinging, that takes precedence.
Yeah.
Over
One of my first CCJA experiences, I'm pretty sure it was like you and Paul and probably Eric, and we were all in room 130 at Lamont, and the class was called Time. It's not just a magazine. And we like sat there and we talked about time, and it was like a big aha moment in my life. It was really cool.
Well, it is about, it is about how it feels. And, because even if you play all the right notes and it doesn't feel good, it sucks. It's like there's a certain feel that jazz should have. And if it doesn't have that feel, it's not really jazz. And for me, it could be still good music, but it wouldn't be, I wouldn't call it jazz, And cause you can improvise in a classical way, I think,
Sure.
I think, Mozart and Bach all were known for being able to improvise. So I think that part of classical music, kind of got left behind, but that's probably not a good thing that it happened back then. But for me, I just wanted to get to a level where I could play a solo that sounded like I actually knew what I was doing,
Right.
So I was always reading and trying to, and every time I got to play with all these people at the PAC and later on at Dazzle, or mostly at the PAC, because I was always asking, and back in Arkansas when I was, when I got to play with Benny Golson back. That was the first time I played with Benny Golson, was in Arkansas. And I was just asking questions. He probably got annoyed. But I was just, because I was just, what about this? How about when you play with so and so? Just all these different questions. But they were always, I think for musicians like that, if they feel like that you're really sincere about learning the music, they were really very open to helping you out.
You mentioned the Peck, and I was gonna ask you, like, you were there, was it 12 years?
Yeah, 6 years for 6 nights a week and 6 years for 7 nights a week.
Man, what is that like? What did you learn? Like, I mean, I'm sure just everything, but I'd just love to hear about the experience and like what that kind of consistency, like what that taught you.
Well, it taught me how to play correctly. And because if I didn't, I mean, playing every night like that, if you can mess up, your hands, if you don't play correctly. And especially sometimes when I played, sometimes I would have, I remember one day when I had three gigs in one day, and I had three weddings in one day. One was up in Estes Park.
Oh boy.
One was down in Conifer, and one was in Denver. So I had to drive. I drove to Estes Park, played a wedding, drove down to Conifer, played a wedding, and drove to Denver and played a wedding. Fortunately, I wasn't playing at the Pack that evening, but that's, when you play like that, and you got to learn how to pace yourself so you don't injure yourself. Part of what happened, one of the things that did happen to me, was from playing so much one time that my left arm only felt good when I had it in the position of actually playing the bass.
Wow.
It was like, that was the only time it felt comfortable. And, I'm just so I just started becoming aware of when, and a lot of that, being noticing when you have tension going on in your body. And that's the thing, I talk to my students about, is that tension, is you got to be aware of what your body's feeling when you're playing. You want to be as relaxed as possible.
I went through like tendonitis and stuff, and I think it was because of just all that tension and not being
Yeah. Well, yeah, tension is not good. I mean, for your strings, it's fine, but for you, when you're playing, it's not. You need to be as relaxed as possible. And another thing I noticed, even though I wasn't playing a wind instrument, is that breathing, making sure I'm breathing when I'm playing. That's another thing that when I was early on, when I was playing, that I noticed I was holding my breath. And you can't play if you don't get air to your muscles. Right. So those are kind of like fundamental things that, came up in my own playing that, when I teach, I kind of try to convey that to my students, that you should be as relaxed as possible as when you're playing, that it shouldn't feel like, work.
Totally.
Even, yeah.
Did it ever get like exhausting working that many nights in a row for so many years, or?
Well, of course, I was younger then. It was just easier, so I didn't think about it. All I thought about was just I was getting to play the music I loved playing, and I mean, occasionally when you had 3 gigs in a day, yeah, but that was more of a physical tiredness than it was a mental thing.
Do you have like one question that I asked on like our Instagram if anyone had any questions, and one of them was if you have any like memorable gigs or your most memorable gig, or maybe from the Peck or elsewhere.
Well, from the Peck, there's a lot of memorable gigs from the Peck. When guys were in town, to have a whole big band come in, when they were playing in town, or it's like one time, you know, there'd be, they'd have a gig in town, and then all of a sudden all these guys just show up, you know, and so they want to play, and so it's like I remember more than a few times that we were playing at the Pack, and these guys come in, and we played, and then at you know at 1 o'clock when Jerry closes down, he locked the door, and it's just we played until like the sun was coming up. And that happened like you know several times. So and you know, the fact that I got to meet all these great musicians that you know that I had been listening to on records was always you know I felt really blessed and lucky,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you know get to ask them questions, and, you know, and ask them, you know, and get feedback from them. That was always, and you know, the thing about playing for people at those levels is as long as you come up to them and you're sincere about what you want, you know, they're very open to you, you know, and so I try to carry that on when you know musicians come up to me now, younger musicians, and be as open as I can and try to give as good advice I can give, just from my experiences. So, which is all I can do, you know.
Yeah, it really is all about sincerity. I love that's come up a couple times, and I think that's a really important thing to highlight is like just, you know, having integrity and sincerity with what you're doing. Um, oh, I was gonna ask, like, also with the consistency of those gigs, like, if you could speak about what it's like to play with the same people, like, super consistently. Um,
Oh well,
Especially like with Dazzle too, you did the every Friday for a long time, or every last Friday. And
well, yeah, but the sextet, you know,
yeah,
I mean, how I put the sextet together, you know, and was, you know, I mean, Paul was like one of the first people I met. I met him like the first time I went out to sit in, and the minute we played together, it felt good. And you know, it's like I think I've said this before. It was like whenever I'd play with people, and I thought about if I ever put a band together, you know, this person is. And you know, when Jeff moved to town, kind of thing, he called me up and said, "You know, I have this gig," and I played with him. And I said, "Okay," and then played with Peter because of Art Landy.
mhm.
And so, and then when Al came to teach at DU, and so that was, and Dave Corbis had the same thing, you know, we played, and it was like, okay. And so that's how I put my band together. It was like, every time I played with these guys, it was always fun. It was just easy. And so that's how the band got together. So, and I think for me, that was a big thing, you know, because I want to enjoy playing music with the people I'm playing with, you know. I mean, I mean, if I don't, you know, let me, how do I phrase this? Not to sound, I mean, I want to enjoy playing music with the people I play with. I mean, not that I don't take gigs just for the money, but I'll play a gig that doesn't pay as much if it's with the people I'm playing with. I enjoy playing with them,
Mhm.
you know. So even though I want to make money, yes, I want to make money playing music, but I enjoy playing music, you know. So you know, you know, I mean, I love playing music. You know, it's for me, and I mean, this for me. This I think you learn more about me from me playing than you probably talking to me. I don't know.
With the sextet, having like, how long do you guys do the monthly Dazzle thing for? Was it monthly, right? Every last Friday?
Every last Friday. We started in what year did we start? 90 something, early 90s. So at least Well, I was at the Pack for 12 years, and then we started doing when I left the Pack, we started doing the Dazzle. So at least 10 or 12 years.
That's amazing. I feel like that consistency must give you like such a good way to fine tune what you're doing. Did everyone bring tunes and like you guys, would you ever
Oh,
workshop stuff or was it just like you come and
well, I mean, people, I was always open. Peter would bring in originals, Jeff would bring in originals, uh, or tunes that people wanted to play. It was always open to, or I was always open to if somebody had an idea about how you wanted to do something. This, because it takes a little pressure off me to have to always try to, I didn't necessarily want to be a leader. I mean, when Donald, I said, you put together a band, and but I'm not necessarily a natural kind of leader. I just kind of lead uh, from behind the bass. I mean, I don't tell. I mean, I'm not that I don't have. Sometimes I have specific things. If I write a tune, then I might have specific things that I want to happen. But other than that, I don't try to tell people how to play something.
do you approach playing your own music like any differently than as a sideman or is it all the same?
Well, I probably you do because you wrote it and you want it to sound a certain way.
Right.
I don't think that's natural, but and Paul would bring in tunes and Peter would bring Jeff, so everybody was kind of contributing to the band repertoire. So,
Do you have any favorite tunes like that you just always love to play? Like
I,
name like 4 or something.
not really. I mean, I've played. I played a country gig. So back in Arkansas. So it's like not that getting to play with Johnny Frigo, this violinist, great violinist. And, I've played a lot of different types of gigs. I played a country gig when I was first starting in Russellville, Arkansas, and I didn't really know country music, but it was probably the only country gig I played. Then I played. I did a lot of stuff with Lanny at her club for a while, and after I left the Pack, so things like that, shows and things like that, and. But for me, it's all music. As long as it's feel like it's uh, the musicians I'm playing with are listening to each other, and for the most part, I'm not that I don't take gigs just for the money, but mostly I want to have a good rapport with the musicians I'm playing with, because that's important.
Earlier before the interview, we were talking about Paul's question about so Pharaoh Sanders was the one who told you to leave Little Rock.
A Little Rock.
Right?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about your experience playing with him, what that was like.
Well, it was kind of like I was playing this place called the Afterthought in Little Rock, and I had a I had a nightly gig there. I was playing there like 5 and 6 nights a week. Well, and I was playing with this great piano player named Charles Thomas. He was from Memphis, and and also Art Porter. Everybody know Art Porter Jr., but I was playing with Art Senior. And Art Jr., when he was in town, he'd come and play too. And Reggie, his son, would play drums. But Art you know, it was like, fortunately, I got to, you know, I was like standing next to him, and you know, and so you know, he'd call all these tunes. Initially, he would, you know, if I didn't know the tune, you know, a lot of, I mean, like Charles and Art, you know, they knew thousands of and so they'd call a tune, or sometimes, you know, I'd be listening and I'd find a tune that I like, and I go, you know, Art, or Charles, you know this tune, and Charles was like, you know, Charles had these great ears where we had this singer named Sissy, and she'd bring in a tune, and he, maybe if he did know it, he would play it right away, and in whatever key he, you know, and if he didn't know it, he'd say, let me listen to it. And he'd listen to it once or twice, and then he'd play it. So this was like, oh my God. This because when I first started playing with him. And so, and he was just, he loved, well, he loved Errol. He could do Errol Garner, like he loved Bud Powell, and you know, but he could do. Oh, he could do. What's the country? Who was the country? Floyd Kramer. You've probably never heard of him, but he was like a Nashville Grand Ole Opry player, and he's on all these country. Charles could do him. He sounds just like him. This because we get people come in and they request these country tunes, and I mean we're in Arkansas, but but he could sound just like Floyd Kramer. And if you're just go to YouTube and put on Floyd Kramer, so you'll get an idea.
I'm gonna write it down so I have it.
But and we'd make tons of tips. We made more in tips than we got paid for the gig, for stuff like that. But but anyway, so we were playing all these different types of, you know, songs, but getting to play with him for so long, I learned so much from him. So, you know, before he passed away, you know, I was happy I got to tell him how much he helped with my musical development and education, because he was just such a great player. And it wasn't that, you know, because you know, he wasn't like a school player. He was like, I mean, not that he didn't go to school. He learned all this stuff playing with people who were like, you know, he didn't messed up, man. They were like, what do you think you're doing? You know? So he kind of had that attitude when you're playing, you know. And I'll just, you know, I've told the story before, but it was like I was going through my Scott LaFaro stage of, because I was listening to Bill Evans, and I was like listening to Scott LaFaro, and I was like really into it. And I get on a gig one night, and I try to play like Scott LaFaro, and Charles said, "Play the effing bass,
Mhm. Such a good story.
And that was one of my first lessons of play the gig you're on, not the one you wish you were on. That's how you keep a gig, you know.
Right.
You play the gig you're on. So things like that, you know, like I say, he wasn't necessarily a school taught, you know, he learned his being on the gigs and playing with these people who were like, what are you doing, man? What do you think you're doing? And so, and Art Porter was like more school, but he kind of had that same attitude. You know, what do you know, play what you're supposed to play. You know, play. You know, and so those were the guys who were kind of my mentors. And there was another guy named Bob Palmer. His nickname was Bebop Bob, because he loved You know.
That's such a good nickname. A cool nickname.
Yeah, he loves Bud Powell, and you know, he's a great player. So whatever, you know, I was very fortunate to play with these guys, and they were always very patient with
Hmm.
me through my development as a bass player.
Well, I'm going to take some questions from the chat and also from our Instagram. What is your favorite band or group today and why?
I don't know.
Or what have you been listening to lately,
I
maybe?
haven't. Well, I haven't really been listening to too much music right now.
Hmm.
I mean, most of the time I'm listening to music is when I'm because of a gig, and I go. Occasionally, you know, I'll be surfing on YouTube and I'll find some things, but I haven't really been uh, listening to anything really lately. Just I'm just trying to make it through this situation we're in the
Do
world right
you
now.
do you remember your last gig like pre-shutdown, like in like early March, late February?
Um, Not really. I just like it's just like this year has been like kind of obliterated by.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, the last gig I had was the one we played up in the Muse.
Hmm.
That's the last gig I remember. I mean, I've had some memorable gigs, but as far as recent, I mean, like the gigs, all the gigs I played at Dazzle and Nocturne and all those things, and getting to play with all the different people. I mean, but I mean, I just enjoy playing the music. If I'm playing
Hmm.
with good musicians, that's really the main thing. You know, people listening to each other and everybody's in the moment and trying to
Hmm.
make good music. I think that's for me. It's not even necessarily even if I'm playing music, I'm not necessarily wouldn't call that my favorite music or song. But I mean, if I'm playing with people that are listening to each other and everybody's in the moment and we're making good music, then I think for me, it can't get any better than
Totally.
that. I mean,
I don't know, for me, I found that like the pandemic kind of allowed me to, I don't know, reset and chill and I don't know, like remember that life doesn't have to be like stressful. I was curious if like you found any anything positive through this weird time of like isolation, either like musically or otherwise.
well, I think for me, not playing as much, uh, I miss playing, and I miss that camaraderie being, that is for me, and just trying to find things, to stay connected to the music because it's easy to like kind of like. So I think probably more listening now, and
Hmm.
we have just to stay in touch with what's kind of happening.
Totally.
Since I can't play as much, um, but I want to still, and I try to practice because if I don't, I lose my calluses.
Hmm. I can't even imagine. I'm out here just playing piano. Man.
Because when it first happened, I wasn't playing, and I mean, I don't know if you can see where's the camera right there. You see my fingers.
Oh yeah.
that's when you don't play, that's what happens. The blood blisters where until that skin toughens up.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Right.
first, the first shutdown, and then kind of started playing again. But it's not. I'm not. When I was playing regularly, that never would happen. I mean, I'd get the skin would get tough, but it'd slough off, and it'd be the new skin would be a little bit tougher, and so I wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
blood. But right now I got 2 blood blisters
Oh man.
from playing gigs. And I haven't had those since when I first started, but things like that. But I mean, the thing is that even when I had it those when I first started, I must have enjoyed playing the music because I kept doing it anyway.
Right. Totally.
And the whole thing was that when I'm playing, I don't really feel it. It's after I stop playing,
Right.
it starts throbbing, and I feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And but I have I don't know I think I've been very lucky to get to play with all the musicians I've gotten to play with,
Mm-hmm.
and I just feel very fortunate. So I don't feel like I made a bad decision. I enjoy my path I've chosen to go through life as.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean I've gotten to go see places Italy, Australia, Canada,
Mm-hmm.
travel, and all getting paid for it. So
Right.
and so I have no regrets about doing this. I mean, like I said, my father wasn't a big fan of musicians. He just thought they were just, he had no use for musicians. But eventually, I don't know, he never understood it, but eventually he heard me play, and I think he came to respect that I enjoy what I do and I love what I do.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Let's take a couple more chat questions. Here's one. Do you feel you can mind read most drummers, or primarily with drummers you play with a lot, or all instrumentalists, not just drummers?
Well, I don't. For me, playing, I feel like as long as the drummer is a good musician, they have a good time, and I think I can. I mean, you have to adjust to different people. You know, uh, playing with uh, Paul. Is because we play together a lot, but. Uh, but I've played with a lot of different drummers. So, but I don't try to. There's no one way to play with a drummer. So you have to figure out how to work because different drummers have different feel. Every drummer has their own where they place the quarter note when they're playing swing, or how they play us Latin music, or So you have to adjust to that person. Not you just can't, there's no one way that I don't go in with this mindset that I only have one way that I'm gonna do this. I think I adjust to what the situation is at the moment. You don't know if you remember drummer Chris Lee. He was here, he very light touch, but very different. He played with art a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And playing with art's a different way of playing, right?
Totally. Yeah.
and so that's what I mean about listening within the context of whether it's a trio or a quartet, or whatever size group you're playing. Learning how to adjust and play with the musicians you're playing with, and understanding that you would have to adjust to kind of make it feel good. and that's really the most important. How can I make this feel as good as possible?
Yeah, like that's what you were saying with play the gig you're on. That's like
Yeah,
the same idea. It's
yeah,
like about serving the music at that.
yeah. That's the most important thing. When you're playing the music, play the music. Don't it's not about your ego or just you know. Uh, and I think that's the biggest thing I learned from with older musicians when I was first starting, because they just didn't put up with crap.
Mhm.
They just like, no. Yeah, what are you doing? So um, not that I don't maybe I don't come off as hard as they were, but if I feel like somebody's not playing, I mean, especially in teaching, I don't come off as hard as they did, because I'm not in that situation. I try to explain why you know, when I'm talking to students or people who are asking me about playing.
Mhm. One other question, since you mentioned teaching, was like, when did you land your position at Lamont, and how did that come about?
Well, I played some gigs with Art, and
Art Bowden?
yeah, and Lou Fisher was leaving. He was going down to North Texas, and Art asked me, he said, "What do you think about coming and teaching bass at DU?" And since my degree was in music education, I said, sure.
Mhm.
And so when I first started, I was still at the PEC. So I was doing like, 6 and 7 nights,
Marathon.
6 and 7 nights at the PEC, and then started teaching at DU. And, you know, so that was another whole um, episode in my career,
Mhm.
but also figuring out how I wanted to teach and how to teach
Mhm.
music to people.
What have you been there? What, 28? How many
I
years?
was there almost. This would have been my 30th year if I hadn't. And so I was there 29 years.
Wow, crazy.
This would have been my 30th year, and I was thinking I was going to go maybe 30 or 30, a couple more years, but COVID
Yeah.
happened. Not that I didn't. I just, like I said, I just for my own safety and because I had health issues in the past, I just
Mhm.
actually I can't do this. But at some point, maybe I can come back. I don't
Mhm.
know, but we'll see. But um, I think, I mean, I've enjoyed teaching, and I feel like hopefully I've added something to the scene in Denver.
I would say that you certainly have.
But and I do get to do what I love, and I get paid for it. So
Yep.
it's like the best of both, all the best.
Totally.
So and I miss not playing as much as I have. But, hopefully, I'll get to play more in a year or two. So,
Mhm. All right, one last chat question. Let's see here. What other cities around the US have you spent time in, and what do you think of Denver as a jazz town?
well, I like Denver. I mean, I thought about moving to San Diego, uh, and Pharaoh tried to get me to move to New York. I couldn't do that. I went there and played with him, and I played with Benny there.
Mm-hmm.
But I just like, and I went there before I moved out here. I actually went there, and I had a cousin, I have a cousin who lived right around Lincoln Center area of town, and her sons were going off to college, and so I had a place to stay. It was a couple of $100 a month at that time. And we're talking about 1985. And like I said, I had played with Benny, and he brought me to New York to play. And our very first night of playing with Benny and Golson, and he said, I told Ron about you, Ron Carter. He's going to come down to hear you. And so, and okay, and that's another thing. So Benny goes, and we're rehearsing, and so Ron comes down before the gig, not during the gig, before the gig. So I know he's there. It's like, don't think about Ron Carter being out in the audience, but he was very nice, and he said, if you move here, when you get here, give me a call, and I'll give you the lay of the land. And he's very friendly, and Rufus Reed, same. All those guys were very, very supportive and very nice. So.
But you decided New York wasn't the hang for you.
No, it wasn't. I mean, I liked visiting there, but I can't. If I live here, I'll die. I can't live here.
I kind of feel like scared of New York in that way. Like, I don't know. I've never really spent time there, but it's a great place to visit, but just the vibe there. I grew up in a little town of about a little over 1,000 people, in Arkansas. And it was just, if I could walk out across the street from me with this big pasture with cows, and another 2 miles was the Arkansas River. And it was like kind of in the country. And Little Rock was about, 4 or 5, 6, about 10 miles. It wasn't even that far away. I was a mile outside the city limits. And most of my gigs were in Little Rock, and I moved. I mean, eventually I moved to some different apartments in Little Rock. After I moved out of the house, but it was manageable for me at that time. And going to New York and just, it's like, there was no quiet time, and there was a little window of quiet time, like around 5 to 6 in the morning. It's like 1 hour that was actually quiet, and then everything would just start up. It was like garbage trucks. Of course, my cousin was living. It sounded like a war zone because it was horrible. I was like, yeah.
I can't live here. I can't. And so I moved back to Little Rock, and then eventually coming out here.
And you stayed. Denver's glad that you stayed. We're really happy you're here.
No, I'm happy to be here. I mean, I was going to move somewhere. Like I said, I thought about San Diego because I liked it, because I played out there with Pharaoh, and I played in San Francisco with Pharaoh. And I liked San Diego, and I liked being close to the water because I like to fish. And I was like, and going deep sea fishing is one of my. I still want to do that. I haven't gotten to do that like I really want to do that. So maybe one of these days.
Post-COVID, you'll have to go on a big deep sea fishing extravaganza.
I like to. It's like, I used to watch American sportsmen all the time when they were fishing, and catching these huge huge fish, fighting a fish for like an hour. But, I mean, like I say, I have no regrets about choosing the path. What I did, I've got to see the world, and didn't have to pay for it.
Totally, yeah.
Other than, we took a trip once where I paid to go, but on a ship.
Mhm.
But other than that, when I got to go to Australia twice, and Italy, and Canada, and all those places, and I was paid to go there, so.
The dream.
So that was, and I got all these, connections with all these great musicians that I used to listen to on records,
Right.
And so I feel really blessed that I've been able to do that. But
Yeah.
so, you have any other questions out there? I don't want to just.
Yeah, everybody feel free. I just want to say, Ken, that you've been such a important and important mentor to me, like during my time at DU and even growing up in CCJA. And I just want to thank you because, you're talking about how you learned from the people that you were playing with, and I feel like I've learned so much from you too. So I really appreciate it.
I think it's important for, the people who I learned from were patient, and and they took time to explain things to me and say, this is the real thing right here. This is what's happening. And I think for me to pass it on, I felt obligated that I needed to pass that information on and knowledge that they gave to me. So that's how the music stayed alive.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I, I I'd like to speak to the feeling that exists between drummers and bass players, and as it pertains to Ken and me.
Yeah.
So, with Ken, and I guess, like the way I think of it, he might described it that way was, it was love at first sound. And
Well, yeah, it was because I think that was one of the first gigs I played with you. Where was that place?
was that with James? Was that
This,
the Colorado Boulevard thing?
this was a little small place, and, it's like I can't remember.
Yeah, I like, there was so many things
I mean,
back there in the early
yeah,
'80s. It was like a lot
yeah.
of stuff going on.
When I moved to
Um,
town, and I played with Paul, and it was like from the very first time we played together, it was like, well, okay, this is.
yeah, that'll work. But man, and that was over, that was a long time ago. Almost, 35, 36. You got here in '85, right, Ken? Is that right?
Yep, yep. November.
85. So 35 years. And we've probably logged in, gosh, I think the years at the Peck, man, like four like some solid years of 4 nights a week with Billy Tolles, and playing AC Doocy with each other on the breaks every break. We go make ourselves this Chipotle sludge back in the kitchen, and then just proceed to play AC Doocy. And we, and I just feel like I could go sit at the drums right now and play with Ken, and hear him, because it's a sound that exists in your heart, and you talk about the way you feel together. It's like I just love the way that feels together, and the time, to get to be in the sextet, and the time we spent with Billy, and all the other gigs we played
Yeah,
with, like with Benny Golson and
Charles McPherson.
Charles McPherson. Yeah, like great cats, like Richie Cole, and
Oh,
just just the list is just endless, and the things we've gotten to learn together, like Marlena Shaw, we did that a couple times. Yeah, but just the feeling that you get when you make that sound together and the time is together and it's a sound that's like together.
Well,
I
people,
always hear my sound and Ken's sound together. I don't hear those
well,
as separate things.
yeah, I think, people listening to each other and trying to make the music better every time you play. I think that's what it's about, and not getting caught up into, oh, how am I doing tonight, just
I always liked how you addressed like leaving, like after you were done with the gig and you were going home. So Ken, tell them, for all the musicians out there, like what, like who have a tendency to maybe brood about their playing on their way home from the gig, that kind of stuff. Yeah. What's your philosophy with that?
Well, it's like I'm trying to, at the moment, because music is an in a moment thing, unless you're recording it, because other than that, you won't ever hear it again. You won't ever play that same thing the same way again, ever. So, all you can do is try to play better the next time. Every time you play, you try to play better than you did the last time you played. And I think with experience, you always, I don't play the same way I played when I first moved to town. I don't think so. I mean, there's still probably some elements of that there, but you over the years of playing with different people, your playing changes and you develop different way, and you learn how to play with different people, to adjust to how you play with people. You can't play the same way with like I can't play with Tony Black the same way I play with Paul or piano players, or with Jeff. I can't play the same way I would play with, because everybody is different. So you have to, and I think that's where the playing with the people I played with in Little Rock, like Charles Thomas and Art Porter Sr., because they were like very, they would let you know how they felt at the moment when you weren't taking care of business. Yeah, so, and so it was very important for me to listen to what's going on in the moment and being aware of what's happening. And for me, it's always, what can I do to help make the music feel better? That's always what I'm kind of thinking.
But then after the gig is over, it's over. You
It's
just leave
over.
it there. Yeah,
Like
just leave it there. It's not gonna. There's nothing you can do to bring it back.
You can't change anything.
That's what I remember you telling me that. One time, I just leave it. Just leave it as soon as I leave the music in the room that I just left.
That's really good. You play it and it's gone. It's not coming unless you're recording it. It's gone. It's and it so in a way that's really good, because it makes you. I think it helps you stay in the moment like that. I think that's a really important mindset for when you're playing. You play it, be in the moment, and be right there at that point. And I think that's when the best music is made, when you're in that moment, because and not being inside your head. I think that's the worst thing that you can. You start thinking about what you're playing instead of just playing.
That's all advice I desperately needed, for sure. Such good reminders.
If nobody will really notice when you make mistakes unless you make a big deal about it. And you can always go, it's choruses, so you get to fix it the next time around. And not that I haven't played on some train wrecks, but that happens. That's life. But it's not the end of the world unless you make it the end of the world.
Man, that's some solid advice. This is such good Hey, I'm so glad all of you are here. I just wanted to thank you again.
Thanks, Camila.